Guys, I have a good bit of explaining to do. I've lied to all of you on a few occasions. Now, I haven't lied about any of the creatures, ghosts, or people though, so don't worry about that. But I have lied about how I acquired some of my possessions. As all of you know by now, I did not purchase my .45 caliber handgun. It was gifted to me somewhat indirectly by a good friend. What I have not explicitly stated yet was that I didn't exactly buy my house, or the property either. I'm sure many of you already figured that one out though. What I'm getting at is that I was placed here. 3 years ago, I was approached by an organization while I was hiding out in a bar in Mexico. I have no fucking idea how they found me, because even though I had been shit-faced for 2 solid weeks, I know for sure no one in that area spoke English, so I don't think I could have ratted myself out. I fucking tried to find someone, honestly. Also, the people I was hiding from were not paranormal in any way, and that is a story I'm not certain I want to share right now, but I may share later on. Anyway, this group approached me and made an offer. Again, I had been shit-faced for 2 straight weeks, so my memory is a bit spotty. But from what I can remember, they said something about helping me escape the problems I had created with a group that normally I would have immediately suspected that they were the enemy in disguise. But again, drunk-ass me thought that this was the greatest fucking thing that could happen. I mean, they offered me a free place to stay with a limited monthly allowance to purchase food and whatever else I needed. I just assumed that it was government funded. Then again, the government thinks I died 12 years ago. I think. None of that matters now, though. See, I pretty much figured out what really happened behind the scenes with some help from Mark. We've been sharing a hospital room for the last week, so we've had plenty of time to think. I'll get to how we got here soon. I think this is going to be a long post. So, as much as Mark and I can figure, the organization that was offering me witness protection type services was actually a fake front that was run by the monster hunting group that Mark works for. Their goal was to find someone with above average survival skills and see how long a human could last in the area with a high concentration of fucked up things roaming around. Let me emphasize that the assholes that planned this experiment probably didn't expect me to survive my first encounter, let alone live there for 3 years. Then, when the Keelets showed up, they got giddy. According to Mark, they've never been able to observe a dead Keelet before the one I killed. He sure knows how to make me feel special. That's when Mark and his crew got sent out, and good old Marky's been here ever since. I think that was 4-ish weeks ago. But enough of the theory shit. Let me tell you about the clusterfuck that put me and Mark into the hospital. That ghost preacher bitch that possessed Mark a while back only got about half her facts right. I found this out when Mark and I decided to go to the home base of the local cult that lives in the back of my property. They call themselves the Chosen. I don't know what they were chosen for, but I for sure know that no one in that ragtag group of dipshits shouldn't be chosen for anything except extermination. They have tried to sacrifice me 3 different times now, and the last attempt, they went as far as attempting to try to burn my house down. But I caught them in the act and convinced their leader, a short Latino man named Hector, not to bother me anymore. I didn't really want anything to do with them because they're so awkward. But Mark was certain that they probably had some information about why more deadly creatures seem to be popping up at a higher rate, or maybe at least some knowledge about Skinny. I tried to convince him that I knew more than the Chosen when it came to Skinny, but he insisted that I was as observant as Helen Keller, whoever the fuck that is. So, there we are, standing in front of their little shanty town that they call the Ponderosa. It's mostly made up of metal shed and parts of mobile homes. Yes, parts, as in people living inside with whole walls missing. Keep in mind, these people aren't poor. Almost all of the members have nice cars and trucks parked outside their homes. A new Silverado, a nice Ford Mustang, and many others that I don't know the name of off the top of my head. I don't really understand what philosophy leads them to leave a happy life in a shithole like this. To each their own, I guess. We found Hector pretty quickly. He was in the middle of the squalor preaching about something or other. He noticed me and Mark almost immediately due to the fact that neither of us were wearing dark robes like the rest of the cultists. Mark was wearing black combat pants and a great long-sleeve shirt that made him look like he meant business. I, on the other hand, was wearing blue jeans and a Twizzler t-shirt. Hector stated somewhat solemnly, "I guess we have guests now," and proceeded to step down off his upside-down 5-gallon bucket. As he approached, Mark whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "They're surrounding us." And sure enough, he was right. I look around to see not only Hector approaching us, but about 60 different cultists approaching us from all directions. They were closing in, and both Mark and I were prepared to draw our weapons and defend ourselves when Hector called out, "Children, calm down. Can't you see that he has a gun now? Let's please try not to get on his nerves." I could see Mark smirking out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't have the heart to tell him that they weren't talking about him. "Look, Mr. Hector, right? We were just wondering if you had any idea about where some of the paranormal creatures in this area are coming from." This question seemed to make Hector uncomfortable. "We haven't seen anything like that around here, so..." Just then, one of the black-robed cultists came bursting through the small surrounding crowd. "Grand Bishop Hector, the baby doll spider came back!" At this revelation, Hector knew that we knew that he knew what we wanted to know. All he could do was look back and forth from his distraught follower and us. He finally decided to just awkwardly smile at us. As much as Mark wanted to continue questioning, we both noticed that the cultist that came back was missing large chunks of his robe and his flesh. While the man stood there hyperventilating in front of his leader, Mark pointed out something to me. "Cole, he's holding a severed hand," he whispered. We didn't want anyone to overhear us while all the focus was on Hector trying to console the hysterical man. I responded to Mark's observation with, "Look, if this thing is coming this way, we may have to put the skinny hunt on hold. As much as these people are a nuisance, I really don't want to see a community get slaughtered." Mark shot a conflicted look at me. "I agree, but we aren't prepared for a fight with something like that." While we were talking, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Sonia, Hector's second in command. I hadn't seen her since the last time I was in their little neighborhood, and I hadn't really left on a good note. Now she looked dead serious. "Cole, we have all the information you want, and some that you probably don't. But before I tell you, we need your help. This thing is going to tear us to shreds, but I have a way to get rid of it." Sonia was the only member of the Chosen that struck me as somewhat smart. I think she was raised into the cult, and that's the only reason she hasn't left. In some twisted way, her only family. Before Mark could protest, I answered, "We're in, so what do we..." I was interrupted before I could finish my sentence by a loud screeching. The sound was beyond unnatural. I could describe it as a young woman screaming in terror, but the tones sound like a shitty auto-tune from hell. Mark and I looked at each other. Fuck. Fuck indeed, Mark. Fuck indeed. I looked up to ask Sonia what she planned on doing, but when I looked in her direction, she was already sprinting off. I really hoped that she was going to grab some sort of secret weapon and not just being a coward. I didn't have time to dwell on these thoughts, though. "There's a beast cresting the hill," said Mark as he jerked my attention back to the situation at hand. Sure enough, as I looked through the trees that led uphill, I could see a mass of tan, white, and dark red charging down the hill. As it got closer, the cultists started running wildly. Some pulled out spears and knives, but looked like they were trying to use chopsticks for the first time. They weren't going to be much help. I started to make out some details of the thing as it approached. The main defining feature of the baby doll spider was that it was, in fact, made out of what looked like baby dolls. Not just dolls, though. Mannequins, cosmetic practice heads, and other stuff. It seemed like all of the different objects were held together by some sort of magic stickiness. I disagree with calling it a spider, too. It had 4 legs and 2 arms. It was shaped more like a centaur. Another odd detail is that each body part was made up of that specific body part. Where the head would be, there was a massive mannequin, doll, and other forms of head that were just crammed together. Same rule follows for the legs, arms, torso, and so on. "Mark, What the hell is that thing? I don't know. Usually if you see a doll or something moving around, that's possession. But this is something else entirely. The lady you were talking to better have a good idea. The abomination was now closing in. It had reached the outermost sheds that had dotted the Chosen's headquarters and began tearing it to pieces. I don't think guns are going to work on this thing. I bet it doesn't have internal organs that a bullet could damage, and I doubt it would respond to nat rounds since it doesn't look Native American. We're going to need to use stuff that'll break it. Mark said as he grabbed a spear from a nearby cultist and slung it at least 40 yards to hit the thing in the torso. What the fuck? Mark can throw spears now? Even though it was a solid hit, the monster didn't reel back at all. It just looked in our direction, let out another screech before charging at us full tilt. It was at this point that I realized that the creature was not colored red anywhere on its body. All of the deep red I had seen was just blood that was caked onto the baby doll centaur. Damn it, baby doll spider does sound better. As it got closer, Mark yelled, "Get its attention, I got an idea." I nodded and pulled out my .45 pistol, knowing that it wouldn't kill it, but I could at least distract it. I now realized that I actually started to trust Mark with my life, something I hadn't done in a very long time. I started hitting center mass as the creature neared 10 yards from Mark. He now stopped and turned towards me. Mark took advantage of this brief pause and sprinted towards the creature. I was confused by this until I saw the round thing in his hand. A grenade. I kept firing. Mark slid under the belly of the beast and plunged his hand between the parts that made up the creature's torso. Then, continuing his slide to the other side, he got back up to his feet and yelled, "Cover!" and dove behind a nearby Cadillac. All the creature had time to do was start to look over in Mark's direction before it was obliterated by a teeth-rattling explosion. Hundreds of body parts rained down everywhere. That may have been the most badass thing I have ever seen. It's a really good thing Mark started carrying grenades with him everywhere since the Tall Man incident. Cheering began erupting from all around the compound, but celebration was short-lived. As I jogged over to check on Mark, I noticed that the body parts were still moving. Not only that, but they began moving towards the same central point. The yells of joy started dying down as more people began to realize the thing was just putting itself back together. Just as Mark started to grab for another grenade concealed somewhere on his body, I heard the familiar voice of Sonia scream my name. "Cole, take this! The woman that lived in the trees said you'd know what to do with it." With that, she tossed me what looked like an oversized minnow catching net. That didn't make sense. There was no way in hell that this thing would be afraid of a net like the pails were, even if it was bigger. All my doubts were melted away when I caught the net, though. Sonia was right. I knew exactly what to do. A wave of something came over me when my fingers made contact with the net. It was like an absolute clarity of something, but I wasn't exactly sure what I was certain of. I looked down and realized that where the weights were on a normal net, this one had medium-sized rocks, and on the rocks were symbols, or ruins, or something that I didn't recognize. They would have been pretty hard to see on the rocks if they weren't glowing a bright blue color. Mark looked at me with a stare of confusion, then snapped back to reality and commanded, "Get your ass in gear and use that thing!" I bolted in the direction of the now half-formed doll spider and slung the net over the wriggling mass of body parts. Nothing happened. The body parts kept moving into place and the net didn't seem to faze the thing. Well, shit. I could hear Mark say to himself behind me, and then it hit me. It was like I remembered something that I had never learned before. Before I even knew what I was doing, the word "Rakalut Cha" escaped my mouth. Immediately, all of the once blue ruins changed into a deep red. Smoke started rising from the net, and the beast managed to get one more half of a screech out before it... well, I guess it just stopped existing. While the cheering started to erupt again from the cultists, I immediately approached Sonia. Something that she had said when she first approached me was weighing heavily on my mind. "So, do you mind explaining me why you called her the lady who lived in the trees and not the lady who lives in the trees?" I said with more force than was probably necessary. "Look, Cole, I know what you need to know. She came to me, and she explained everything. Yes, it's our fault that some of the beasts exist, but the shapeshifter needs to be dealt with now, and you are ready to take on that task. She came to me. Hector doesn't even know. She was certain that you would be able to fix this. Please, just listen." The somber tone of the young woman's voice told me that my suspicions were true. The lady in the trees hadn't been hiding, or avoiding me this whole time, and this was really hard to swallow. This is the beginning of a dark path that I hadn't visited in years. I just hope Mark is willing to come with me. There is more to this story, but this entry is getting a little long, so I'm going to cut it off here. I'll post the rest of the story at a later date. Until then, Cole, signing off.